gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? By Great 78.
Who gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? I've seen those English dramas too. They're cruel. So if there's any other way to spell the word, it's fine with me. With me.
Chapter 33. The Becoming. Content warning. Vague description of suicide. Sunday, November 7th, 1999. The Drawing Room, Langcliffe Estate, Swansea, Wales. Kingsley. This was bad. His memories of the last few minutes in the flat with Malfoy, Potter, Rita, and the mudblood were already beginning to blur in his mind, as they sometimes did when he was under stress. Focus! He looked around. He was safe now. He was back in the drawing room of his own estate in Swansea. The ineffectual Potter and Malfoy and the others were in the past. He would be fine.
"Sir, is Master Kingsley all right?"
A small voice from the vicinity of his knee asked. Gibby. The old elf was always worrying after him, offering him calming draughts, wishing to call Percy Weasley. Kingsley was ever unruffled and reserved round Weasley, even when things had not been going well. For that reason, both Gibby and Kingsley called him often, and were glad to have him around. Now, to reassure the elf, he boomed, "Right as rain, Gibby!" He pointedly ignored the loud harumph of disagreement from the corner of the room. Kingsley gritted his teeth, but said nothing. Shucking off his outer robes and dropping them to the ground, he strode from the drawing room, headed upstairs to his bedroom suite.
"Does Master Kingsley wish to have lunch now?"
The tiny elf quaked. On the bottom step of the grand staircase, he paused. "Yes, lunch sounds delightful. Tell all of them that I'm dining alone, however," he growled, his back stiffening from the new low sounds of laughter behind them. Gibby's eyes widened in their sockets as his ears quivered fearfully.
"Them, sir, is they back?"
As if the evidence wasn't in front of his own face. Kingsley only clenched his jaw in answer, ignoring the elf's question and continuing up the staircase, searching for the solitude his mind so desperately needed. Pegwater, Flat 307, Christchurch College, Oxford, England. Theo. 1, 2, 3. In the tiny sitting room of the Pegwater flat, he and Davies and the two Gryffindors reached out to touch Davuka's small silver ring, which immediately glowed a vivid violet. There was a hook sensation behind his navel, a sense of being pulled backwards through space, and suddenly the four of them were standing on shaky legs in a dim, musty drawing room. Theo blinked and looked around. Most of the furniture was grand and imposing, but it was all covered in sheets as though to protect the pieces. It was clear that this room, at least, wasn't used for ministerial functions. "What the hell is that?" came Davy's flat voice. The three other wizards turned to look at what had garnered the man's attention. Along one side of the room, scroll after scroll of parchment paper was affixed to the wall. Written in tight rows of neat, formal penmanship were names: ministerial workers, Hogwarts professors and students, healers and nurses from St. Mungo's, bank agents in Cursebreakers from Gringotts, shop owners, librarians, ordinary folk. Each of the four found their own names easily on the list. Almost every name, the hundreds of them there, had cryptic markings after them. Little stars or hash marks, sometimes a letter or a number. Theo traced his own name, which only had a small star next to it, and nothing else. Only a handful of names above his, he saw Draco Malfoy, which was followed by a litany of symbols. "What the hell do you suppose it means?" Ron asked in an awed voice. He had found most of his family grouped together under an entry for the Order of the Phoenix. Each name was marked first with the number 28, followed by a T, then a hodgepodge of nonsensical letters and symbols. Harry and Davies only shook their heads in confusion, but on a hunch, Theo scanned the list of ministerial workers to find Amelia Bones. Like his name, hers was followed by a star, then a capital letter D. Next was the same hash marks and symbols as many of the other names. In front of her name was drawn a box, with a large red X inside. Now that he looked closer, there were many X's scattered throughout the scrolls. Some were Death Eaters, some were Order members, some names were only vaguely familiar to him. All of them were dead. Surely Kingsley had not killed all of these people, he thought in horror. But as he looked closer, he saw that most of the X's were black, not red like Amelia's. He blinked and stepped back, looking again. Now he saw that there were 2 red X's, Amelia Bones and Dirk Cresswell. Theo's breath sped up. Was Kingsley responsible for Cresswell's death as well? He was sure the man had been killed by Snatchers. It didn't make any sense. But now Harry was trying to get his attention. "What do you make of this?" He and Ron had found Hermione Granger under Hogwarts students. It was written in the middle of the group, and it was clear from the names around it, Anthony Goldstein, Daphne Greengrass, that they had been written there in 1990, when that group of witches and wizards had begun at Hogwarts. Hermione's name was followed by the letter M. Next came the designation 10 OWL. Then an arrow pointing upwards. Then at least 40 or more small marks in Kingsley's cryptic shorthand. In front of her name, the man had drawn an empty box. It chilled Theo to realize that it had likely been drawn to hold an X at some point in the future. He looked back at Draco's name, which he now realized had been grouped with Lucius's, his own, and Tiberius's. Death Eaters and their children, he thought. Both Draco's and Lucius's name also had a box in front of them. Theo supposed he should thank his lucky stars that his name did not. Davies shook his head, clearly trying to dismiss some invasive thoughts. "We're going to have to call this in. This is big. I don't know what it is, but it's bigger than myself and the 2 of you." Theo drew in a deep breath. "Let's just find Kingsley, all right? A manner like this, the fact that we haven't already been greeted by an elf is a bit odd. I don't know what's going on, but I don't like this." Harry nodded. "Agreed." As if summoned by the word elf, a tiny creature popped into the room. She was a young elf, wearing a pink toga, and her ears trembled with fear.
"Hello, sirs. Master Kingsley is having lunch. Chippy tells that Master wishes to eat by himself. Master says he wants to be alone."
Theo crouched down in front of the creature. "I'm Master Kingsley's godson. What's your name?"
"Zuza."
It was clear that the elf was very afraid of something. He nodded kindly. "I understand that your master wants to eat by himself, Zuza, but we really need to see him. Where is he? Where can we find him?" Outsized tears filled the little elf's eyes.
Chippy says Master is in his room upstairs. Master is talking very loud. Sousa thinks Master sees the mind peoples again.
The tears fell quickly, and the elf pulled the tea-towel toga from her shoulder to dry them. Davy's brow furrowed. I thought you said he was eating alone. Who is Minister Shacklebolt seeing, Sousa? The elf looked at the four of them with the saddest expression on her face, shaking her head vigorously and clapping both small hands to her mouth in terror. It was clear that she had been ordered not to speak of it. With a final wail, the elf popped away. Hermione. She and Draco had fallen asleep, wrapped in each other's arms. Peaceful rest that would not last. A loud knock on the front door of the flat startled them awake. Hermione sat up suddenly. "What? Hear that?" Draco placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "It's all right. Just a knock on the door. I'll find out who it is. You stay right here." "The bloody hell I am!" she retorted, summoning her blouse from the floor before flicking on her bedside lamp to locate her trousers. After a prolonged search, Draco discovered his trousers deep under the bed, then found his jumper and shirt turned inside out on the floor by the sofa. It took them almost 2 minutes, during which the person on the other side of the door knocked once again, but eventually each of them were dressed, staring at the other nervously. "Do you think it's him, Shacklebolt?" Hermione asked. "No, I'm certain if they lost him, they'd have let us know. Given us some warning," he answered, with more confidence than he felt. Draco flung open the door. The drawing room. Langcliffe Estate, Swansea, Wales. Theo. He and the 3 Aurors stared at the spot where the terrified elf had stood, speaking only moments ago about whoever Kingsley was seeing upstairs. Ron looked nearly as fearful as the elf had. "He might have accomplices up there. Maybe we should call for backup." But Harry's brow furrowed. "No. She said he wanted to eat alone. Then she said he was talking very loudly, but she didn't say he was talking to people. She said he was talking to the mind people." Davies shook his head. "I'm not sure calling for backup is the best idea just yet. We might spook him. If he's talking to people who aren't there, he's in a right state. I don't want him firing off curses like a madman because he's surrounded by an entire Aura squad." Harry nodded. "Let's just go upstairs and try to talk to him. Maybe we can help him get right in the head, long enough to bring him in." With trepidation, the foursome moved to the doors, silencing the steps of the large wooden staircase as they climbed. Sousa had not told them which door belonged to Kingsley's suite, but the minister's muffled, crazed shouts led them to the right place. The Master Suite, Langcliffe Estate, Swansea, Wales. Kingsley. He lumbered and lurched up the grand staircase, desperately needing to be alone, to get away from everyone he'd left behind in his drawing room. They'd outsmarted him, though. As soon as he'd closed the door to his private suite, his father's voice crashed down upon him. "All you had to do is keep your mouth shut and your head down." Kingsley cringed, his back still to the room, hands still gripping the doorknob. They were the words that he'd heard his father say to him so many times in his life. Words he'd just told the Weasley boy only a few minutes ago. Or did he say that to Amelia? Now he couldn't remember. "Father, I told you I could handle it." "Well, you did an ass-sucking job of that, let me assure you," Everton Shacklebolt said from across the room. Kingsley turned around, knowing exactly what he'd see. His father stood there, in the robes he'd been buried in 14 years before. When Everton appeared to him these days, the man was usually in some stage of decomposition. Kingsley took grim satisfaction in this. It served the old bastard right, he thought. "You know I'm not here, Kingsley. None of us are," Everton reminded him. "The healers have told you that." Kingsley looked to his right. Sitting in chairs in front of the fireplace were his grandfather, Gefland, and Amelia Bones. His grandfather, Gefland, wore the zoot suit favoured by Muggles nearly a century ago, a dark green fedora pulled low over his brow. He tipped his pipe, tapping it against his crossed knee to settle the tobacco inside of it. It was a gesture that Kingsley imagined his grandfather doing, seeing as he had never met the man. Gefland died 10 years before he was born. Everything he knew about Gefland came from Everton's stories, newspaper articles, and the whispers of older wizards. Amelia Bones fixed him with a knowing glare, raising her head to stare down her nose at him. The tight grey ringlets framed her face and neck, and even from here he could see the bruises that circled her neck like a neckerchief over the top of her red jumper. Everton spoke again in a crooning whisper. "Going round the twist, are you, son?" "Shut up, old man," Kingsley said bitterly. He had grown to hate his father, even as he continued to rely on the man. When he died, Everton had not found helping his son to be a good enough reason for sticking around in actual ghostly form, so he haunted Kingsley's mind instead. "You're just as much of a fucking fool as your father was," Gefland scoffed at him. "You were always a target." He shook his head. They were throwing his own words back at him now. He had to ignore them. Lunch. That's what he needed. Something to eat. "Gibby!" The elf appeared with a tiny pop, balancing a tray of food in his hands.
"Gibby have food, sir."
"Make them all leave," Kingsley said with a wave of his hand. Gibby looked around, over at the empty chairs in front of the fireplace, trying to hide his scared, confused expression. The bone china on the tray in front of him rattled with his terror.
You need to leave now, sirs and missus."
"You know he can't see us, don't you?" Amelia Bones had the audacity to laugh at him. At him! He was the Minister for Magic, he thought. No thanks to her, of course. The witch pointed a long, bony finger at him. "I believe he's gone positively crackers at this point. Pulled out all his hair. Raving mad half the time." Kingsley breathed hard at this. "No, that's Malfoy. Malfoy has done that, not me." He reached up to clap his hands around the sides of his head, feeling the smooth pate of baldness beneath his fingers, and knowing the words were true. He had not seen Lucius Malfoy since school. Wasn't that right? "No, you fool. You saw him put on trial. And you sent him to Azkaban last year. Don't you remember?" Everton said, suddenly right next to him. Kingsley could smell the rotting stench of the man's body, could hear the creak of the aged joints of Everton's skeleton under his rotting flesh. "I said shut up," Kingsley said dully. In a fit of anger he kicked at Everton. His foot connected with a satisfying smack. Gibby and the tray of food went flying. "Now look what you've done," a voice said from the washroom door. Kingsley kept his eyes forward, not wanting to look. He knew exactly who this was, and some days On really bad days, the sight of this wizard haunted both his dreams and his waking hours. Dirk Cresswell, though 4 years his junior, had been a solid friend of Kingsley's, as he had worked his way up the ranks in the Auror Corps. In better days, he and Dirk were known to share a drink after work, to shoot the breeze round the cafeteria tables at lunch, to idly chat about Quidditch standings. Nowadays, Shacklebolt did not see him very often, but when he did, the man was always covered in blood and his own vomit and entrails, wearing the most haunted expression on his face. Kingsley had not been the one to drag the knife across Dirk's neck, but he might as well have been. The day that Runcorn approached him, asking him to check the family backgrounds of a list of ministry employees, Kingsley had a decision to make. Every one on Runcorn's list was either a pureblood or a half-blood. All of them had wizarding family trees, stretching back at least 2 or 3 generations. That was not going to be welcome news to the man who prided himself on sniffing out Muggleborns. But Kingsley knew of at least one Muggleborn that Runcorn had missed. Dirk was a Muggleborn, Kingsley knew, because he had been the one to help the man come up with a plausible family tree that made him appear to be a half-blood. And so, when Kingsley returned the list of names to Runcorn, suddenly there was a new name on the list, and this name was Dirk Cresswell. Dirk never suspected him, of course. The wizard had owled him just before he went on the run, asking Kingsley to look after his wife and sons. Jacqueline Cresswell was a pureblood, and her sons half-blood, and they did not need Kingsley's protection. Now, Kingsley steadfastly ignored the dead man standing in his toilet door. The wizard's shirt was covered in blood and the remains of his disembowelment. As an Auror, Kingsley had been on the investigative team that had recovered the bodies from their murders. The minister had seen it enough times to know that he did not wish to see it again today. Instead, he said quietly, his fist clenched, "You seem to have forgotten who you're dealing with. I'm Kingsley Shacklebolt." Dirk's blood dripped on the carpet, just inside the bedroom door. Gibby would have to clean that up later. The wizard laughed, spraying more blood from his ripped-apart jugular vein. "You're a fucking joke. You're useless." There was a tisk, tisk, tisk sound over his shoulder. He could feel hot breath on his neck, and the smell of it told him exactly who it was. French onion soup. The last time he'd smelled it, Amelia Bones had been breathing it in his face, saying his name, her last word. The witch was mocking him. He spun back towards her, grabbing her red jumper roughly, the red jumper that he'd killed her in. But no. She'd been wearing red robes, not a red jumper. He was confused again. Amelia stared him directly in his face. Close up, the purple, mottled bruises were the exact shape and size of his hands. He could see quite plainly now. The witch gave him a mean-spirited smile. "How kind of Dirk to show up tonight as well. Double murder? If only Rita knew about that. Maybe I should tell her. That's the sort of thing that gets you a Dementor's kiss, if you're lucky." Kingsley pushed at her, but she did not budge. "If you had just listened to me, allowed me to lead, you would have been fine," he muttered to her, quietly, so the other wizards could not hear his weakness. Behind Amelia, his grandfather's pipe smoke twisted in hazy purple-white coils as the dead man watched him through narrowed eyes. "She deserved it," Gefland reminded him. "She was standing in your way." You were born for this." His father strode towards him suddenly, raising his hand as he came. Everton struck his son hard across the face. The stench of rotting flesh wafted over Kingsley. "Listen to him, Gefland. Nearly crying over some dead witch. Not even a witch he'd taken into his bed, just some worthless cunt who dared to stand in his way. I'm beginning to think this useless pile of pus was born into the wrong family. God, I cannot figure out for the life of me how you managed to get where you are." The Minister for Magic drew in a shaky breath, trying not to breathe in the putrid decay. "Get out. Leave me alone, all of you." Peckwater, Flat 307, Christchurch College, Oxford, England. Hermione. Standing outside of the door of the flat, holding take-out bags from an Indian restaurant next to the cinema, stood Richard and Linda Granger. Her mum began hesitantly, holding up the food uncertainly. "We brought lunch." Hermione moved automatically as though to hug her parents, then stopped abruptly. "Hello," she said. There was silence for only a moment before Richard spoke. "Crabcake, we just wanted to apologize. Your mum was upset. She didn't mean what she said in that letter." Hermione's bottom lip began to quiver. "No, she was right. It's understandable that Mum was upset. I get it," she said, but her mother cut her off with a small sob of her own. No, darling, it wasn't," Linda reassured her, tears beginning to fall now. "Perhaps I had a right to be upset, but I didn't have the right to take that out on you. Please, I hope you can forgive me. I wasn't able to see what was in front of me, the child that loved me. I was wrapped up in an idea. I thought I was losing something I needed. And meanwhile, I was pushing away the treasure in my life that I already had. Hermione, I'm so sorry." Hermione wiped away her own tears as Draco cleared his throat to speak. Dr. Granger, please come in. Apologies for my manners, leaving you on our doorstep for so long. Linda Granger gave an embarrassed smirk at his stammer. "We understand. We were 20 years old once, too. Now, how about we sit?" At this, the older woman eyed the tiny kitchenette table doubtfully. Draco and Hermione exchanged a quick but grateful glance at each other, both highly glad that the sitting room no longer looked as though an explosive duel had recently occurred there. "It's all right," Hermione said quickly. "We can enlarge it. Draco, can you duplicate the chairs?" Within a moment, the cramped space now held a much larger table, with 4 matching chairs. There was barely room for the 4 of them to maneuver around it, but at least there was a place for everyone to sit. As they took their seats, Richard spoke up. "Crabcake, let me start by saying I'm really sorry as well. Your mum thought she was doing the right thing, writing to you to ask you to give us some distance." He reached across to squeeze his wife's fingers reassuringly, as the woman tried to hold her tears in check. "You see, every time you wrote, I would get upset. In reality, I missed you so much, but your mother thought that I didn't wish to see you, so she wrote those things to push you away. We've learned now—" At this, Richard broke off, his eyes sliding quickly to Draco before returning to look at his daughter. Hermione suddenly remembered Shacklebolt's words about Draco having visited her parents. What exactly went on, then? "We've learned how wrong we were. Your mother and we want to get to know you again." Hermione was quiet, twisting her napkin in her lap, even as she tried not to raise her hopes. She always knew that of the pair of them, her father was the one most likely to want a reconciliation. The 2 of them had been quite close when she was young, and even that day in the floral shop, Hermione saw something within him, a longing, under the anger, that the man's face could not hide. It was Linda's words that finally put her at ease. "We want to get to know you, and not just as the daughter we always knew. We want to get to know who you are now." Hermione looked up in time to catch Linda and Draco exchanging a look. She would need to get the whole story eventually from him, she could tell. But right now, Linda was still speaking. "It's come to our attention here lately that, for years, we were trying to deny something very important about you. We always thought of you as only our daughter, just a normal girl from Hampstead. When we learned about magic, we thought you would go off and have a bit of adventure, and then you would return to us the same as you had been before. We thought you would perhaps follow in our footsteps into dentistry, or try your hand at politics like my father. Honestly, we thought witchcraft was just a passing fancy, a fun little hobby." Hermione's eyes moved from Linda to Draco, who seemed to be taking everything in with interest. Richard cleared his throat, then reached across the table to hold his daughter's hand. "We've come to learn a lot more about you in the last day or so. Yesterday morning I called someone to whom I haven't spoken in a number of years. When we dropped you off at the Hogwarts Express the very first time, a helpful gentleman gave me a telephone number to a shop in a village called Chittlehampton. Apparently it was the closest shop to their little hamlet, and the shopkeeper would take messages for their family." Hermione nodded, even as she furrowed her brow in confusion. "Who was this?" "His name was Arthur Weasley. He happened to be in the shop when I called by lucky coincidence. He says he knows you quite well," Richard said, looking back and forth between both her and Draco. At these words, Draco dropped his gaze nervously. "And, what did Mr. Weasley say?" the young wizard asked, not meeting Richard's eye. "He explained what Hermione did to save the lot of you during the war. He said you were instrumental in the victory." Draco nodded in agreement. She was. "And he had things to say about you as well, Mr. Malfoy," Richard went on. "Sir, I can assure you that I have nothing but the greatest of respect for your daughter. He was cautiously optimistic about you. Hermione testified for you, and that seemed to have swayed his opinion a bit. And apparently his future son-in-law has had a few dealings with you in the last few months that have been positive. I think he sees potential in you." Draco's face burned at her father's words, but Hermione had the feeling that the kind words from Arthur Weasley meant quite a lot to him as well. Now he only nodded. "Mr. Weasley is a good man. I'm glad he was able to help you understand more about Hermione." "Well, shall we eat?" Hermione wiped away her tears with a smile of relief, finding her appetite suddenly strong. "Let's," Linda said, pulling dishes from the bags and spreading them on the table. "Oh, Draco, by the way, before I forget, I wanted to give this back to you." She held out a crisp square of white fabric, small green letters embroidered in one corner, "and I wanted to thank you for your visit. Without it, I don't know what would have happened to us." Hermione turned a highly curious, cocked eyebrow in the direction of the former Slytherin wizard. "Hermione, I'm sorry I didn't tell you," said Draco hurriedly. "I just knew the letter had upset you, and I felt they should know." "Don't be mad at him, Crabcake. Draco only stopped by to give us a healthy dose of reality that we sorely needed," Richard said with a wink at Draco. Hermione's tears started anew, a dam bursting free within her. "You did that for me!" Draco unfolded the handkerchief and reached over the slightly larger table to wipe away her tears. "I would do anything for you, love." At these words, she cried harder than ever, even as she joined in with her parents and Draco's hopeful smiles. The Master Suite, Langcliffe Estate, Swansea, Wales. Kingsley. There was a knocking noise on the bedroom door. "Kingsley, are you in there? Open up, it's Theo."
Shall Gibbie answer the door, Master Kingsley?
The frightened elf asked, crawling across the floor where he'd fallen, covered in food. No, don't answer it. It's a trap. He'll have the Aurors with him, Geflin warned. Answer it! You need to pay for what you've done! Amelia Bones shrieked at him. Minister Shacklebolt, it's Roger Davies. I'm here with Potter and Weasley and your godson. We just want to talk. Can you open the door? Another voice said. Amelia cackled. Another one for Azkaban, then. No, Kingsley said feebly. He reached out for his father. Help me, father. I can't handle it. Please. I'm done trying to fix things for you. You made this mess. It's up to you to get yourself out of it. Everton gazed at him with his cold, dead eyes. Then he turned back to look at his own father. Geflin? Kingsley's grandfather stood, his body still lithe and lean, not encumbered by age or by Kingsley's negative memories of the man. He lifted one perfectly manicured, long-fingered hand to the crown of his fedora. Carefully lifting the hat from his head, he smiled conspiratorially at his grandson. I think you know what to do. Geflin tilted his head just a bit, and the firelight in the dim bedroom glinted off of the blood that ran down the man's smooth jaw, from the small bullet hole just above his ear. Kingsley was grateful to his grandfather for not turning his head. As an Auror, he had seen his fair share of exit wounds from Muggle guns, and it wasn't a pretty sight. Must I? Kingsley asked Everton, turning to his father with almost childlike helplessness. Must I, father? Everton grimaced. I think it's the only way. For once, Dirk and Amelia almost looked happy. Dirk spoke up. It's in the safe, over the mantel.
Master Kingsley, sir, Gibbie opens the door now.
The little elf called to him piteously. No! Amelia's once lifeless eyes now glittered with vivacity. Don't open it. Open the safe instead. 020598. Remember, the day you became Minister for Magic. I'm Minister, Kingsley said, as if to remind himself. The fact almost surprised him now. I'm Minister. Everton nodded. That's right. If you open that door, you won't be Minister any more. But if you open that safe, you'll always be Minister. Shacklebolt, open the door. I'm giving you 1 more minute, then I'm coming in, the voice said from the other side of the door. Do it, croaked Dirk. Kingsley pointed his shaking wand at the mantel, removing the painting of his mother and father that hung over it. The figures in the painting watched him placidly, unspeaking. They seldom spoke to him nowadays, anyway. He much preferred this more solid version of Everton in any case, when his father was being pleasant, at least. The dial spun under his careful direction, the smooth clicks of the lock spinning deftly, as though the lock had a mind of its own. The door opened silently, and he summoned the gun, cradling it in his sweaty palms. That's it. You've got it, son, Everton said in a fatherly tone. Kingsley raised the old Muggle gun that had belonged to Geflin many years ago, pointing it at the bedroom door. The barrel wavered horribly. Strong grip, Kingsley. Keep calm and carry on, Amelia said, her tone almost reassuring now. He clicked the hammer down, tightening his hold on the grip of the ancient revolver. Everton placed a hand upon his shoulder. Amelia reached towards him, turning the gun barrel towards his own temple. The muzzle was cold, but his grandfather's smile was warm and comforting. "Don't worry, you won't be alone down there," his young grandfather said. "Down there?" His tongue tried to form the words, but it was too late. His finger had tightened, squeezed, and everything went black. Thank you for listening to Who Gives a Fuck About an Oxford Comma by Great 78. If you enjoyed the story and would like to listen to more, please follow me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Silver and Copper. Or you can find me under Great 78 on Archive of Our Own.